want to thank Pastor Austin for making those announcements, quite a bit of announcements as he mentioned. And that last announcement he made about the love offering that we're collecting for the bathroom remodel, I guess on the surface, we're remodeling the bathrooms and helping to pay for that. But to be more specific, deeper into the issue, the Chinese church, Three Self Church, has asked us to help with this. And I think this would go a long ways to helping them. Giving has been down, especially for the Three Self. And so for them to come to ask for our help is actually a kind of an honor. We get to bless them and bless the church here in China. So please give generously. As Pastor Austin mentioned, all the offering collected on December 6th will go toward the bathroom remodel. On the surface, suicide is about death. So if a suicidal person completes their goal, their task, they will die. But if you delve deeper into suicide, when you delve deeper into suicide, it's actually about life, not death. The suicidal person doesn't necessarily want to die. They want to change something that's happening in their life, but they just don't know how. So there's a big difference between wanting to die and dying versus wanting to change something about your life, but you just don't know how. And the only thing you can think of is just ending your life. There's a girl by the name of Lori. She was 14 years old. She was baptized in her church. And a few months after that, Lori dropped out of the church. The youth pastor, tried contacting her, but haven't been able to connect with her. She never returned any of the phone calls or emails or chats. And her absence, they found out later, was the reason why she kind of dropped out of church and youth group was Lori was pregnant at the age of 14. About a month before she was expected to deliver her baby, Lori cleaned up her room. She emptied out her locker in her school and wrote a note to her mom. And the note read this: "Mom, you kept asking me if I was okay, and I kept telling you I was, but I wasn't okay. I'm sorry, Mom. I've got too many problems. I'm taking the easy way out." If you think that suicide just deals with teenagers, I was reading an article just the other few weeks ago by Lady Gaga. I don't follow Lady Gaga, but I know she's very popular. I did watch her movie, the movie that she was in, A Star is Born, which is a very good movie. And so she's an actress, she's a pop singer, very famous, probably one of the most famous singers in America, female singers in America. She was on the morning news, CBS Morning News one time, and she actually was a very interesting interview. She actually was very frank and honest that all of the success that she has found, especially recently with her hit albums and her movies, she said that she has thought and actually attempted suicide many times. And to the surprise of the news reporter that was interviewing her, the news reporter asked whether she still thought about suicide. And Lady Gaga looked her straight in the face and said, "Yes, I do, every day. Yes, I do, every day." So suicide is not just something for teens. It's not just something that affects teenagers. It doesn't just affect nobodies. It affects everybody. Suicide is intentionally killing of oneself. And we understand people die. People die of old age. People die of cancer. People die of traffic accidents, disasters. But suicide is different. Suicide is self-inflicted, and it is a choice. The statistics are very alarming. 40,000 confirmed suicide each year in the U.S. That comes out to be, I just found statistics in the U.S., and also I was able to locate some things in Hong Kong. But in the U.S., that's 110 suicides a day. That's 4 suicides every hour. And I would say that these numbers are very low to the actual numbers because many suicides are misreported. Many suicides are misdiagnosed as accidents. And so these numbers are actually very low compared to the real numbers. There are many reasons for suicide, and we'll talk about that. It's not just about depression. That's actually one of the myths, and we'll get into that for a second. There's reasons like revenge or anger, pride. But the common thread in all of the suicides is the feeling of hopelessness. It's the idea that they cannot see, a suicidal person can't see any other alternative. All they can think about is changing their circumstances, but they don't know how other than death. So this feeling of hopelessness is a common thread, and so that's why I wanted to use this opportunity to preach a very different kind of message. This message this week and next week will be very different. It's going to be very practical. And maybe if you're listening and thinking about suicide, this will help you. Or maybe this is something that you can help somebody. You want to help your friend. You want to help your relative that you are afraid is suicidal. What do you do? What do you do? And so hopefully this will be a message that will be very practical in helping all of us. Okay? So to start off with, I wanted to talk about some myths, some myths and misperceptions about suicide. So myth number 1, this is something that I learned as a Stephen minister. Myth number 1 is if you talk about suicide, you will encourage him or her to do it. And that's a myth. That's a misperception. The reality is talking about his or her thoughts and feelings of suicide really helps release and helps alleviate the person from actually committing suicide. So talking about suicide will not make them commit suicide. It actually will help prevent suicide at the end. So it helps to talk. Myth number 2, and I hear this a lot, but myth number 2 is a true believer cannot commit suicide. A true believer cannot commit suicide. And this is a myth. There's nothing in the Bible that talks about that. Actually, we're going to look at some case studies of people in the Bible, including Samson. Samson was one of the judges, and he's actually mentioned in Hebrews 11 of the great people of faith. But at the end, he committed suicide to seek revenge against the Philistines. And so that's a myth. And I personally know people that were Christians, that committed suicide. And so that's a myth. Yes, suicide is breaking the 6th commandment of thou shalt not murder, because suicide is murdering oneself. But God is able to cover all of our sins, all right? All of our sins. Suicide is not the unforgivable sin. That's not what Jesus was talking about when he talked about the unpardonable sin. And so that's a myth. Number 3 is suicidal people are intent on dying. This is a myth. Actually, suicidal people want to end their pain, and they think they are out of options and out of hope. Not wanting to end your pain is not the same as wanting to die. Okay, so that's a myth. Suicidal people, it's not a question. Again, that's what I mentioned in the beginning. Suicide on the surface, on the superficial level, is about dying. But when you delve deeper into this topic of suicide, it's actually about living. They want to live. They just don't know how to live in their present circumstance or in their present situation. Number 4 myth is, this is a big one. Mainly teenagers are at risk of suicide. And this is where I asked some help from our admin about getting some statistics. It's kind of hard to find statistics, I'll be honest with you, hard to find statistics in China. So we looked at Hong Kong, we looked at the US. The highest risk, and I'll just tell you just from the numbers, okay, and these are people that have actually committed suicide. So it's not just attempting suicide, but they've actually died from suicide. And these are just the reported ones that have committed suicide, unlike the other things that are not reported where the police officer might think it's an accident, but not. So anyway, here are the statistics. The highest risk of people committing suicide are males between the ages of 15 to 25 and then 55 to 65. Let me repeat that again. The highest number of suicides by far are males ages 15 to 25, and then 65 to 65, the number just escalates in senior years. And if you think about it, in the late teens, early 20s, young people are trying to find themselves and they're trying to figure out how they want to spend their lives, and some of them, they just can't figure that out. And then in the late 50s and when you're in the 60s, people in this age group are often facing the end of careers, perhaps facing failures to achieve certain life goals, and maybe even at this age, you're looking at declining health and finances. So yeah, these are the people that are most at risk. And the reason why it's males that are most at risk is because of the way they typically commit suicide. And it's typically a lot more violent. Males typically will do something a lot more violent to themselves. So, looking at this myth, who's at risk? Let me ask you, who's at risk of suicide? It's everybody. Every one of us are at risk. It's not just teenagers. Number 5 is suicide is always caused by depression. Is always caused by depression, and that's a myth. Yes, depression is one of the reasons, but it's not even in the top 3. Actually, other factors are the cause of suicide, and some factors such as anger,